Now I'm so embarrassed I don't have to leave. Thank you very much. It's really wonderful being here tonight, and it's great being in the Veterans Writers Group, and also being in our little splinter writing group that Julie and Nancy and I have a writing group that meets every few weeks, and it's wonderful having that time. And it's God, it was 25 years ago, I think, that I first stumbled into the Veterans Writers Group when it was first beginning. And I'm going to leap right into, I'm setting this up so I can time myself so I don't like go on for like 3 years here. But hang on one second. There we go. But there was something very magical, or is something very magical about the Veterans Writers Group, that there are certain things that the culture does not want to hear, that it closes its eyes to. There are messages that we would prefer not to have. And there was something about the way the group was run, about Maxine's work in the group and the other people in the group, that could hear stories out of you, that stories that wouldn't necessarily come out into the world otherwise were sort of called out by just the act of hearing. And so I'm going to start by first reading something that I wrote back then at the first, one of the first meetings, and it's called The Measure of the Man. The only symptom Will complained about was the itching of his toes. He could wall off the dull throbbing in his knees and wait out the phantom pains that ripped his calves. These had an end, but the itching was constant. It chewed through his defenses and gnawed at his core. Will couldn't understand how something that no longer existed could torture him with such specificity. His big toe itched in the hairs just below the nails. He'd reach to scratch it. There would be nothing there. On my morning rounds, I'd wash the men's stubs, change their bandages, empty their urinals, and hand out their sedatives. In the afternoon, when the ward quieted down, Will and the other members of the betrayed generation killed time playing cards. We drank coffee, smoked cool cigarettes. We talked about girls, movies, Jimi Hendrix, but never about Vietnam. While waiting for the Marines to discharge him and ship him back to Watts, Will grew an afro, a big, bushy, black afro. Captain McQuithy, the lifer nurse who ran the ward, ordered him to cut it. When Will refused, she wrote him up for insubordination. I tucked Will's robe around his knees, lifted him into his wheelchair, and pushed him down the gray linoleum ramp to a French door that read security. A pot-bellied man with gold hash marks on his sleeve took the nurse's report and began filling out the forms for the court-martial. He asked Will the usual questions: name, rank, place of birth, race, height. Will replied in a flat, almost emotionless voice: William Counts, private, Los Angeles, Negro, 4 feet 3 inches. The petty officer stopped typing and repeated the question about his height. Will repeated, 4 feet 6 inches. Leaning out the door, the petty officer looked at Will for the first time, his skin turning a faint pink as he mumbled, "I meant your height before." Will pulled himself up in the chair and yelled, "Measure me, you motherfucker, measure me." So that was a largely 95% true story. And that was something that was just called out of me by being with Maxine and the group. And part of the writing process in the group itself is something that has a lot to do with the healing process, about how it is that we're trying to grapple with what it means to be human beings who live in a world where there is so much war. And the definition of veteran in the group is very fluid. The veteran really extends to anybody who's been affected by war, like Julie being the child of a Vietnamese woman and an American who was working in Vietnam. Her life has been completely impacted by war. I mean, she in a very real sense is a veteran. Many of the people in the group are women and are in that, some of them were actively in the service, and some of them are people who've lost their husbands or other people. And in our definition, all of those people are veterans. And when I was working on the psych wards back in the day, when I was in the hospital corps, PTSD hadn't even been identified as a diagnostic category. And in my opinion, I think that the entire country has PTSD. I think that we're constantly inundated with fear and violence through the media, and that enters our being, and that we know the realm, the depth of which that's happening. We know it in an unconscious manner, no matter how much we try to repress it. And I feel that that's something that's very important about writing, about the mission of writing, is to try to really grapple with that fact that it is this. So part of to me, when I was working on the psych wards, I mean, it's being this 19-year-old boy pretending like you're a junior psychiatrist, with these patients. The two things that I thought that worked, one was reality therapy, and the other was kindness therapy. And those were things that we just sort of invented. So one was just telling the truth whenever you could, as long as the truth didn't hurt, as long as the truth was not callous. And the other was just trying to be as kind as you could so that you could hear what it is that people had to say.
Quick question, what year?
69, 68, 69. So since then, as part of my therapy, and I'm running over already, I'll read one quick poem. That part of the way that I try to grapple with the fact that my unconscious is tangled into these issues, whether I am consciously grappling with them or not, and I don't have any choice but to deal with them. And part of my technique for trying to deal with them is to use gratitude as some kind of antidote to the fear and pain that I feel in the world at large. So I often write poems that have this kind of gratitude overlay to it. So here's one that I just wrote a couple of years ago called When in the Beginning, Plant Trees. I am grateful that contrary to his deathbed prediction, there was no deluge when Louis XIV died. I am grateful that Eddie Teller's fear proved false and the first atomic bomb did not catch the atmosphere on fire and turn the earth into just another bright light. I am grateful that life creates thought, that thought in its turn creates words, that words can grow fingers, that fingers can plant trees. I am grateful that in the beginning was the Word, or rather, I am grateful for the words that will be when we arrive at the beginning.